Hello and welcome to Geek to My Interest. I'm Joe. Today I'll be covering the movie Johnny Mnemonic. Spoiler warnings if you haven't seen it yet. Now, this is a movie I saw when it first released, and I liked it enough to pick up a copy when I found one. Pretty sure that was a bargain bin find. And to celebrate the flawless release of Cyberpunk 2077, I decided to dust off my copy and give it another watch. Was it still enjoyable after 25 years? The movie is based on a short story by William Gibson. The screenplay is written by William Gibson himself, and it was directed by Robert Longo. It stars Keanu Reeves, Dolph Lundgren, Dina Myers, and Ice-T. Originally, this movie was envisioned to be a more artistic film. They were hoping to secure around $1 million or so for the project. The studios, not willing to take a risk on such a film, offered them an estimated $24 million if they would consider making this a feature film. And that's what they did. When it was finally released, it was not well received by audiences or critics alike. The opening crawl sets up the world. Corporations rule. There's a mysterious plague called NAS, or nerve attenuation syndrome, that's infecting much of the world's population. There's a power struggle between corporations and a resistance faction called the Low-Techs, who are hackers, resistance fighters, everyday folk. The corporations use the crime syndicate Yakuza to fight back, and there are mnemonic couriers who smuggle sensitive data in wet-wired brain implants, because I guess VPN and encryption aren't a thing. This all takes place in the near future, 2021, or now. And it's always fun when movies try and portray what technology is going to be like 20 or 30 years down the road. They did it in Blade Runner, where in 2019 there would be flying cars, and in Johnny Mnemonic, 2021, the internet was a fully 3D immersive VR environment. We got neither of those things. I just got 25 years older. And a fancier phone. In 2021, it was also portrayed as being somewhat dystopian, with corporations pulling the strings, lots of social unrest, people running around wearing masks, and a mysterious plague infecting much of the world's population. Okay, that part is spooky. Keanu's character Johnny is a mnemonic courier. He had to sacrifice some of his long-term memory to accommodate the brain implant, the memory of his childhood. At this point in his life, Johnny wants out of the business. He wants the brain implant removed and his long-term memory restored. The scene opens up with Johnny in a hotel room. Johnny calls his underworld broker friend, Ralphie, to see if he's set up the procedure. Ralphie informs Johnny that the procedure's costs have gone way up, and that if he does one more job, he should have enough to cover it. So Johnny takes on one last job. The story revolves around Johnny meeting the client, collecting the data, and delivering it safely while the Yakuza and the corporations try and hunt him down to stop him. Oh, and there's a cybernetically enhanced code-breaking dolphin. Sure, why not? So what did I like about the movie? Well, the environment was pretty well laid out. I got a good sense of the divide in society between the rich and the poor. For example, the scenes that include the corporate office and the hotel were nice, crisp, and clean. And there's a scene where Johnny's screaming to the world saying he wants room service and a $10,000 a night hooker. Wow, that's an expensive 2.5 minutes. In stark contrast, the poor neighborhoods were grimy and run down. The Night Scene Club really illustrates this, where it's in a state of disrepair. And there's an interesting scene with a makeshift hospital. And what I liked about that was it really showed that a lot of the population is being left behind and forced to fend for themselves. Now, a lot of these scenes were shot at night, and I suspect it's because they wanted to mask off a lot of the details and save on budget. But they do portray the feeling pretty well. The only critique I would have about this is that some of the areas looked almost too run down, almost bombed out, and it reminded me of European cities in World War II. The action, for the most part, was passable. There was nothing overly demanding. There were no wow moments in it, definitely nothing that required Dolph Lundgren's ability, but there was nothing in there that made me cringe so hard I imploded, so that was good. The story, for the most part, moved along at a pretty good pace. I didn't find myself wishing that any particular scene would end or that it was overly grindy. They made their points and they moved along fairly efficiently. Where this movie falls short for me, well, I'll tackle the easy ones first, and that's the technology, specifically around the implants. In the books by William Gibson, which are fantastic by the way, there's a character, Molly Millions. She didn't appear in this movie due to licensing rights, but she had retractable razor blades under her fingernails and bonded lenses over her eyes to enhance her vision, as well as her nervous system being jacked up and other enhancements. This made her really stick out as a character. In the movie, we have Jane, played by Dina Myers. She has her nervous system jacked up, and they illustrate this by having black dots on her forearms. And honestly, I could have pulled off the same effect with a black magic marker for all the effect it had. There was nothing in this movie that really showcased cybernetic enhancements in a cyberpunk world. Many of the other props they used in this film were just standard tech tools with a bit of flashy material attached to them, if at all. So the last piece of technology I'm going to talk about in this film gives me the biggest hang-ups, and that's Johnny's implant itself. So in the movie, he uploads twice as much data as he has capacity for, and this causes synaptic seepage. This is going to kill him in 48 to 72 hours if he doesn't offload the data, but I can't help but ask myself, why? Like, in the books, there are modules that you put behind your left ear, and they will give you knowledge you didn't have or enhance your abilities. But the impression I get with the implants in this movie is that it's an overglorified hard drive in somebody's head. They call it wet wired, but apart from looking really painful to upload data, it doesn't show him to have the ability to do anything with it. I think they needed a few lines of dialogue to describe why this thing is more than an overglorified hard drive, because if it's not, why not put it in your arm or your leg? The last negative for me was some of the performances. Now, I'm a big Keanu Reeves fan, and there are some movies he's great in, the John Wick series, the Matrix series, but when it came to this movie, there were a lot of hits and misses. It wasn't all bad, but there were some scenes that seemed too exaggerated. Dolph Lundgren's character, the street preacher, was a wasted opportunity. He was being set up as the big bad, a cybernetically enhanced hitman. But after a lot of studio cuts, we were left with a few funny lines of dialogue and some uninspiring fight scenes. Dina Myers and Ice-T were pretty new to the acting scene, and their performances can best be described as average. There was nothing too spectacular about it, although their characters are put in some situations that don't make a lot of sense. Whether it be Ice-T's character J-Bone, who rappels down in full sight of a killer who just murdered his friend. Why would you do that? Or Jane, who's microwaving someone. Now, I, for one, fully support the notion that you should love what you do. But you're microwaving a human being. And Johnny owes her $50,000. You better pay up, dude. I've heard some people say that William Gibson's books don't translate well to movies. I don't think I really agree with that, particularly now with today's movie-making capabilities and special effects. It would be interesting to see this movie remade today, and I would probably base it on one of William Gibson's larger stories like Neuromancer. Now, when I saw this movie the other day, I was watching it with my honey, who was seeing it for the first time, and despite the shortcomings I mentioned, I have to say, yeah, we enjoyed it. Now, this is coming on the heels of watching the movie Fantasy Island, so admittedly, the bar was set really low. But if you like the cyberpunk genre and are looking to waste a little bit of time, I do recommend that you try this movie out, either again or for the first time. Thank you for spending your time with me today. I hope you enjoyed this movie review. Please stay tuned for more reviews of movies and TV shows to come. Have a great day and take care.